Welcome back to Weekend Dawn with myself, Liezle Wilson. And as I preempted before the break, this is the part of the show where we look at the week that was in news, current affairs, and all things interesting in and around the world. But this time around, we're actually going to take a look at what transpired throughout the year. And to chat about this, we are joined by Newzroom Africa's Head of News and Current Affairs, Dianne Hawker. And she'll be taking us through the year that was for 2019. Good morning, boss. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
It's bright and early. Welcome to my world.
Thank you.
It's been such a significant year. I mean, looking at some of the victories that we've had the Springboks, we've had a Miss Universe, we've had the Global Youth Choir.
Absolutely.
Let's start over the Springboks. What do you think that did for us as a nation, apart from obviously becoming a bunch of winners in the world?
Well, I think it came at a very good time for us as South Africans as well. I mean, we'd been going through a lot. There'd been issues with the economy, ESCOM, state-owned entities. We just came out of an election, but I don't think anybody really felt like there was much that was different per se. And then, you know, the Springbok moment came. And I think also the most significant part of that was that it felt like such a unifying moment for the nation as a whole, because, you know, rugby has this conflicted history. You know, where it's very much considered to have been a white Afrikaans sport. But here you had a team that was being led by a black South African man, you know, who grew up in really, you know, poverty type of conditions. And he went to lead the team that won the World Cup. So overall, I think everybody was just in awe that we'd actually achieved it. But also because the Springboks actually, they had lost one of the games in the opening stages. And, you know, amongst the rugby statistics was that no team goes on to win the World Cup if you ever lose in one of the stages. So that was also quite significant. There was the New Zealand factor and about whether we'd actually be able to beat them. And there were also lots of surprises within the World Cup as to who actually made it to the different levels. Japan was playing really well. And I mean, I think that just the energy of seeing those supporters from Japan gave the sense that there was a possibility that they could have made it. You know, obviously New Zealand was a firm favourite. So it was a really interesting World Cup to have watched, both from from a perspective as a South African who's just seeing these changes in the country. And it's kind of like, you know, the dreams that we had being delivered on. And I think one of the things that I felt was most significant was also how the Boks came back home and shared that experience with so many South Africans going around the whole country with the trophy, from big towns to little towns. I mean, you remember them here in Johannesburg, and then going back to the Eastern Cape where a lot of the players come from, and getting people from those small towns to also see the trophy. So, I mean, all of that kind of just lifted the spirits of the whole nation, which was in a bit of a funk at the time, I think.
Yeah, I remember people declaring that it was officially December after they came back.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Another story that touched our hearts, of course, that helped us to fly the flag, is Zozi Binzi, of course, who is the Miss Universe.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, she's had quite a journey, because she, 2 years prior to that, only made the top 12. And then Demi Lee Now Peters ended up taking the crown for Miss Universe. And I mean, 2 years later, she's on top. She's revolutionizing the hair movement and what that stands for. What do you think her crowning has done for the nation at large?
Yeah, I think also the thing that people have been commenting on is how, for the first time, you've got a black Miss World, a black Miss USA, Miss Teen USA, and I think there was one other one, Miss America as well, because they've got Miss USA and a Miss America. So and many of those women having natural hair. In the beauty industry, there's been a sort of a trend where you see oftentimes people wearing wigs and weaves and not feeling comfortable, black women not feeling comfortable enough to wear their natural hair or going extremely short, as Zozibini has been. And this was quite different, because it was the first time really that, even from a Miss South Africa perspective, that we'd had someone who was sort of having her looking as natural as she was, and then going on from there to win the pageant. I actually saw one of her tweets that she posted a couple of days after the win, saying that she's actually sat down for the first time now and really cried, realizing what she'd actually achieved and how amazing this whole process is.
as well. Imagine, just on the go. I mean,
Yes.
my question was, did she move immediately to New York, or did she kind of know? I mean, what happens to your life here? Who's in her apartment?
I think that it's part of the contract. When they do the Miss World prep, they probably tell you, like, if you win, this is what's going to happen. Because they already had the person that would take over as Miss SA kind of ready for that. That was announced, excuse me, a few days later. So I think everybody's kind of prepared that if you win, it's go time, and you carry on performing Miss World duties.
We're looking at another story was in Global Youth Choir.
Yes.
I mean, we saw, I think it literally melted the hearts, the world, the nation's hearts, but
Yes.
also the world, you know, from Limpopo, the choir making it to the finals, obviously losing out. But I think they didn't just win the silver, they won our hearts.
Yeah,
What did you think the significance of that performance was for us as well as a nation?
Well, it also came at the time when I think there was a lot of, there's a lot of political things going on. You're hearing about all the stuff coming out of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, and you're frustrated to say, oh my goodness, and another scandal. And here comes these young, bright, youthful, great singers, from Limpopo, from a pretty small village there as well, who have just completely wowed the world, not only South Africa. And it just gives you a sense of, actually, it's not all that bad, because oftentimes we get stuck in the rut of thinking, oh, this has happened again, and, the lights are off again, and this is off again. But then moments like this actually show you that there is some joy. And I often joke with the assignments editors to say, we need some joy on our diary, because there's so many often negative stories that we're seeing throughout the year. And this was definitely one of those moments where we got some joy as a nation, where we could see these kids. I mean, I think a lot of them didn't even imagine when they were, 5, 6, 7 years old, that in a few years' time they'd be performing in the US, be known around the world, become a household name in South Africa. And I just hope that they go on to perform and do even greater things in the coming year.
Well, Simon Cowell's involved, so I'm sure an album's in the works.
Absolutely.
I'm just looking at South Africa, and if people ever try to become like the second-rate version of America, you realize we are the magic. And we're clearly able to compete on a global platform.
Absolutely.
And win the crown.
Yeah.
You mentioned state capture. I mean, this has been ongoing. In August, we saw it been a year. Obviously, looking into corruption, fraud, mismanagement, etc. People asking when are arrests going to be made, etc. I mean, how would you sum up what has been unfolding within state capture, and where to from here as we enter 2020?
Well, it's been a very long journey. I think also elements of it have been quite shocking, because I think when the commission started, paid for.
Yeah.
And as it unfolded and more testimony came and more people came forward, you kind of got the sense that, hang on, this was actually a lot bigger than we initially realized. Yes, there was the issue of the Gupta family, but it goes far beyond this one family. It goes to the fact that the state was captured. And what does that actually mean? It means that institutions were essentially crippled to allow certain people in positions of power to either gain access to money themselves, or to be able to line the pockets of their friends. And when you start seeing the scale, when they started to talk about the Vrede Dairy Farm project, when they started to talk about Transnet, and the issues there, and of course the different SOEs, then you got a sense that, hang on, this is actually. So when you look at how some of this information was given to authorities and nothing happened, then you realize that actually also our criminal institutions, those were also captured in the process and were crippled to the extent where they didn't actually act. And now we have this commission of inquiry. And my real big hope for 2020 is that now that we've kind of looked in the suitcases and the cupboards and everything, that we actually take that information and do something with it. Because it's no use us sitting through hours and hours of an inquiry and nothing happens. When we hear about all these very dodgy deeds that happened, and also you can actually see, I mean, with the case of the Vrede Dairy Farm, for example, there were people who came and testified about how their lives were threatened, how they lost their incomes, and those people deserve some sort of accountability.
I mean, you also mentioned state-owned enterprises, and we've seen just some of the challenges that have unearthed through that as well, obviously from the state capture, but also just with President Cyril Ramaphosa winning elections and, of course, making promises that many people are questioning about the new Dawn, etc. Yeah. So, I mean, it's SAA, Denal, Transnet, Eskom, the list goes on and on. But looking at the crisis within state-owned entities, the consequence management that President Cyril Ramaphosa called for, I mean, our outlook right now is not looking too good, according to ratings agencies.
Of course.
But going forward, where to from here?
Well, it's not looking great, particularly on the Eskom front, because quite honestly, there's so many things that are dependent on Eskom working well. You know, small businesses, households, SOEs in themselves. If you look at SAA, for example, that's been something where government has been pumping money into it over time without there being much clarity as to when that's going to come to an end. And, you know, there's questions about whether it should be sold off and privatized or whether it should in fact remain managed by the government. At the end of the day, whether it's privatized or whether it retains within sort of government control, it has to be managed properly. And that's the only way that it will actually work. The same with Eskom. There's a plan that was initially put on the table by President Cyril Ramaphosa in February, where he said that the Eskom would be unbundled. And we still have to see that unbundling process taking place. Whether it happens or not, if the unbundling isn't managed correctly and sort of the correct resources put into it and the correct people put at the helm, it doesn't matter what happens, because the implementation really is where things need to be corrected. South Africa, we come up with a lot of great plans. I mean, we've got great legislation a lot of the time, but implementation is where often we fall flat. And that is where we need to see this government, this New Dawn government, really sticking to its guns and saying, if we're making this decision, we are going to implement it to the best of our ability, make sure that we're not wasting money, and make sure that people actually see the benefits. Because I think people are frustrated by the fact that we've bailed Eskom out as well a number of times, and that you continue to pay your rates and your taxes, both at municipal level and with value-added tax and various other taxes, and still you don't have that guarantee that you will have a power supply. Like, that's extremely frustrating, you know, and not only that, to have the president and Eskom tell us there won't be load shedding, and guess what? There is load shedding. So that also makes it very
trust has
frustrating.
been a crucial thing that's been diminished there. Dianne, we are running out of time, because I know this year's been rather eventful.
It's been a lot.
Look, so with the triple threats, I mean, unemployment stats don't lie. It's also risen to 29%, an all-time high for this quarter. So what does that reflect? It's on our president, on the leadership to date, and also the state of our economy going into 2020.
Well, I think all of these things are interlinked. You know, the fact that the SOEs have been you know, gutted to a certain extent. The fact that Eskom is not working. Businesses cannot grow when the institutions that are supposed to be building them up are not working. And the businesses are also complaining that they're losing money every time the lights go off. So how do you then expect someone to come and invest in South Africa, or how do you expect South African businesses to grow? So I think we need, I think in 2020, and hopefully with the State of the Nation in February, we'll get that, a real blueprint of how we'll get South Africa out of the doldrums, because that's what we need right now.
So Dianne, in conclusion, we saw the Trump impeachment. 6th of September, I remember I was on Breaking Dawn, and breaking news, Robert Mugabe, former president of Zimbabwe, passed away. How do you think those two stories fared in the global political storyline for 2019?
Well, with Zimbabwe, that was definitely something that was very closely watched here at home. I think you were here on the day that we had that special broadcast for his funeral. And what we've seen with some of the stories that were being filed by our Zimbabwean correspondent has been that, you know, the situation in the economy in Zimbabwe has not really improved. It's been quite depressing there, in fact. They are also affected by the Eskom situation, of course. But also just economically, the country is also not doing very well, which has ultimately an impact here. When it comes to the US, I think what we're watching going forward is how this impeachment inquiry is going to go. Obviously, they voted for it, but there still needs to be a Senate process. And then also there's an upcoming 2020 US election, which I think is going to be a very important one to watch, because if Donald Trump, if the impeachment does get finalized, he doesn't get to partake in that election, which is, I think, what the Democrats are actually hoping for, because I don't believe that they believe their candidates can actually beat him at the polls. But if they can stop him from getting to the polls, it's a different game.
Sounds like Game of Thrones in real life.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dianne, for joining us. Of course, Newzroom Africa's head of news and current affairs, Dianne Hawker, taking us through the year that was. Time